Welcome to another conversation in People in Fundraising. This podcast features interviews with nonprofit professionals who discuss their career journeys, lessons learned, and enthusiasm for working in fundraising. And here is your host, the founder of People in Fundraising, Tim Wilson.
Good morning, everyone. Today is Thursday, May 28th, 2026, and welcome to another episode of the People in Fundraising Social Impact podcast series. I'm delighted and honored today to welcome José Rodriguez to People in Fundraising. Hi, José.
How you doing, Tim? Excited to join.
Thank you. Thanks for making time for this interview, and we'll get into the questions in a moment, but if you can first tell our audience about you by your title, your employer, if there are websites where they can find you and your company on LinkedIn, please feel free to share those as well.
Yeah, my name is José Rodriguez, co-founder of Impact House Group. We're found at impacthousegroup.com. Really specialize in, I'd say primarily specialize in fund and capital campaigns, but we're also a kind of two-part firm where, we also manage all the creative side of campaigns as well. So above and beyond capital campaigns, that's also brought us into, let's say, the annual appeal world. That's also brought us into just even one-off case statement writings or even just creative projects themselves that have nothing to do with fundraising, like websites, for example, or
Oh,
social media management. So I think we're a unique firm in that way, and yeah, been going strong. I think it will be nearly 8 years for us here in the next month, but really I've only been doing it full time for the last two. So.
okay. Terrific. Well, thank you for sharing that overview, and we'll dive into more about Impact House and your work there in a moment. But if you can first tell our audience how you entered the social impact development fundraising world.
Yeah, great question. So out of college, I had a philosophy degree. Kind of the running joke with the philosophy degree is that, they're opening up all these philosophy factories, right? That you can kind of go and work in afterwards. I really wanted to either go into business, I think ultimately,
Mhm.
or go to law school was kind of like my end goal. Um, it was an interesting journey. I remember, studying for the LSAT, that kind of a thing. But in the interim, I was in a sales role. I found myself in a sales role at a tech startup. It was, the kind of place where you kind of, do 100 dials plus a day, set up demos, that kind of a thing. And I was there for about a year and a half. Quickly realized that kind of that startup life wasn't, what filled my cup, and I wanted to be in a space that was just a little bit more fulfilling. I remember talking to a mentor from college, and he said, "Hey, have you heard of fundraising? I think this is something that could be a little bit more life-giving for you," and decided to give it a try. Of course, like any role, right? They always ask for a 5 to 10 year, 3 to 5 years of experience. And of course, I didn't have that out at the gate. So I did a lot of volunteering at first, and then of course finally landed my first fundraising job. So yeah, that's how I
Okay.
entered the field. So and now it's been, I think, nearly 10 years, a little over 10 years now, and it's been um, a story that I couldn't have written up. So
Yes. Oh, that's awesome. Were there particular moments, people, projects that made you feel like, this fills my cup in development?
question. Yeah, I'd say. My very first role, I was a one-stop shop, one-person shop, like the majority of shops are,
Yeah.
right? And I think I was like 24 years old, in charge of a like $3.5 million budget, and I was in an organization that had been running a deficit for about 3 years of at least $300,000. So they trusted me to try to turn the ship around. But it was also an organization where little had been done in the past in regards to
Uh,
an annual fund or major gifts work or that kind of a thing. So, I would say that experience, and I was really only there for a year before I got poached. of kind of coming in and being able to have like an immense amount of being able to cause an immense amounts of change on all fronts, on the annual fund, on major gifts. We started an endowment. At the time, we were on the like fourth year of a 5-year pledge fulfillment uh,
Mm,
of a capital campaign that unfortunately hadn't hit goal. Um, we were and we were lagging. We were at about 60% pledge fulfillment, something like that.
wow.
So by the time that I left, not only was it like the first time the organization met their budget in 10 years, we also raised about $300,000 in major gifts. We started an endowment. And then I believe I mean, we brought up our pledge fulfillment over 95% by the time that I left.
Terrific.
So I'd say the organization definitely got their bang for their buck. But it was very much, I'd also say that I I was grateful enough to have a boss that kind of just said, go at it and maybe out of not knowing themselves what to do. But still gave me the freedom. They saw the results. We checked in monthly on kind of KPIs and that kind of a thing. And yeah, so I'd say kind of seeing the immense amount of impact that I was able to have at that organization quick and early, and just a little bit of sweat equity kind of goes a long way,
Sure.
right? That's kind of one of the mantras that I kind of live by in the fundraising world is activity equals money raised,
Mm,
right? And sometimes activity means folding envelopes. Sometimes
right.
activity means, listening to a donor, on the phone for an hour and a half, because of a life occurrence or whatever.
Right.
Um, when all you're really trying to do is, invite them to your gala or whatever, or have a meeting with them. Um, but um, but yeah, so I would say that was kind of I think the point where I was like, um, forget studying for the LSAT. I think
Mhm.
maybe business school might be kind of better for me. Um, but I also knew that there was levels to this.
Mm,
Uh, and I knew, that at some point I needed to kind of, for lack of better words, kind of be called up to a bigger league, right?
yeah.
And thankfully that happened like for me. Like I said, I wasn't there. I was there for about a year. And then as it goes with most things, if you're good at them, people start talking and you'll start getting phone calls from folks in other places. So yeah,
Yeah.
I would say that was definitely the moment for sure.
Well, terrific. Thank you for sharing that. My next question here. So I've spent 25 years in institutional-based prospect management roles, and it's very, very fitting for my personality. So I admire social impact leaders like you, Jose, who you have entered the field through an institutional shop, and then at some point you leave institutional operations and you start your own firms. So I'm just curious if you could share what were the factors that made you decide to co-found Impact House, please?
It's a great question. I think we should probably start in like 2023. I remember kind of coming to the end of 2023, really thinking about annual goals and thinking about, what would be next for me. At CCS, I was grateful to kind of be promoted about every year and a half. So I had, for those that don't know, CCS fundraising is by far the largest fundraising consultancy in the world. I was promoted to VP there, and I felt important and big and managing these large projects. Working with organizations, if they were for profits, they would have been, Fortune 500, Fortune 100 companies just because, they had 12,000 employees, 14,000 employees, multi-billion dollar budgets, right? So I feel like CCS really did give me that one, professional confidence, but then also the expertise to really kind of move large massive clients forward and being kind of not just the lead consultant, but the lead executive on a lot of these. Um, but internally, I was like, I have all of this professional satisfaction, but I'm lacking in family satisfaction. I'm lacking in kind of a lot of my own self-fulfillment. I'd say I went from I think kind of just expressing a very fulfilling experience in my first year of professional fundraising to finding myself kind of very much being on 24/7.
Mm,
I'd say I'd start getting emails about 6 in the morning, start getting text messages around 8 a.m.
mm,
Emails really wouldn't stop until like 8. I probably wouldn't go home typically around 8 or 9. That's if I wasn't at a client. And I felt pretty dissatisfied. And I'd say the last year and a half there, I was on the plane Monday through Friday, living in hotels,
oh,
and really
yeah.
only home for 48 hours. So, um, yeah, I was really feel like, not, I wouldn't say I was feeling burnout from the work. The pace was always going to be fast. I was really feeling more kind of social burnout, really,
Mm,
from just it being more fulfilling for me, but then also just being able to be around my family. I have 3 boys. And yeah, just kind of quickly realized that, I get to spend 15 hours with my family any given week, right? And
yeah.
really felt like something needed to change, especially with the upcoming birth of my 3-year-old, and really never felt like it's funny because in 2023, this is a year before I go full time on our own. Um, that December, in my 5-year goals, I write, launch my own, fundraising firm. No idea how to do it, what to do, right? I mean, at
Oh,
CCS, we had so many inbound leads. I mean, the name in and of itself, just carries a lot of weight, especially in the Chicago metro where I was based out of. Um, that's our largest office, at least I'm sure it still is our largest office at CCS. So. Yeah, it was 4th of July weekend of 2024. Kind of just, they were trying to get us to relocate to Chicago, all 3 of us. And then after, your kids get used of having a front yard and a backyard and being able to kind of run up and down the street and have friends on, all sides of the neighborhood. It just became increasingly difficult to just say, yes, I'll move again. At that point, I typically tell people my 5-year-old had already lived in 5 states before he was 6.
whoa.
Um,
Yeah.
I was like, I really need to make a decision right now. The other thing too, if I would have moved to Chicago, we would have not only would have we have been at CCS for the rest of our lives, it felt like, but we probably would have been Chicagoans for the rest. And I absolutely love Chicago, but all that to say, it felt like a decision that would form the next 20 to 30 years of my life.
Yes, that's
Um,
heavy.
so really decided to not put myself in that scenario, and yeah, just decided to resign 4th of July weekend. I kind of worked through the end of July there, really just trying to put things together so that things wouldn't fall apart when I left. Um, and really with nothing on the other side. And yeah, I remember thinking it'd be easy to find work pretty
Mm,
quickly afterwards. I quickly realized that one, either the market didn't support salaries of that range, and then secondly, roles that were commensurate to that salary were often far away, and
mm,
executive searches, right? That typically take anywhere between 5 to 6 months. Um,
right.
so in that interim time, that first week I left CCS, I got like 5 inbound leads. I
Mm,
remember thinking like, I remember, fielding those calls and being like, hey guys, I'm happy to direct you guys to the folks at CCS. I'm no longer there. And, all those conversations, everyone was literally like, "Hey, why don't we just work directly with you?
right.
We don't get to work with someone on your team. We get to work with you directly."
Yeah.
So yeah, that was very much the founding of Impact House Group. Was kind of this serendipitous 5-week inbound lead week where I was like, you know what, I can do this.
Yeah.
And that was how we got up and going. I'd say, yeah, and it's been great. It's been awesome to see success thus far, and yeah, but a lot of the things that always held me back, even going back to 2023, or even just before then, right? Like I vocalized that as a goal, but I'd always told myself like, I wasn't old enough to run my own consultancy.
Mm.
Like I didn't figure it out, bookkeeping or invoicing or contracts or all that, right? But I think the market responded, and we were gracious to make it our full-time thing now for nearly 2 years. So it's been
That's
awesome.
wonderful. That's so good. Yeah, I have my wife and I have 4 kids, and so I totally get the pull between professional and personal life, and making sure that the personal life is fulfilling and you're present and all and enjoying those moments as well. So
Yeah.
good for you.
Yeah, no, it's been awesome. I get to coach my kid's softball team or it's a baseball team now. I get to yeah, just do all the things I always wanted to do.
Yes.
And have to wear a suit every day or a tie, which is also great.
That's awesome.
So, yeah.
Well, Jose, let's pivot to Impact House Group now. We started the conversation talking a little bit about that with um, a broad overview of what Impact House Group does. But if you can share with our audience Impact House Group's mission, your specific role there, um, the website, your company's website, it's described as being a one-stop shop for Catholic fundraising and marketing, and you have raised over $500 million, which is just amazing. So
Right.
congratulations.
Yeah, a little bit about kind of who we are and what we do. Kind of explain how we're kind of a two-part shop, right? Part kind of nuts and bolts of feasibility study capital campaign work, which is, I'd say right now it makes about 80% of our revenue, and
Wow.
then about another 20% makes up kind of the marketing and media assets, right? And kind of mentioned, that's it's as simple as just a case statement for our client, maybe an annual fund case statement. But fast forward to today, we're managing a handful of annual appeals. We're managing one annual appeal of, that raises about $10 million annually. We're managing another annual appeal that raises over $6 million annually, and we continue to get interest in that space. So annual appeal is kind of the mix of both, right? So it's a little bit about kind of how we're able to kind of thread the needle there with folks. Yeah, a little bit about, I'd say what makes us unique. I typically tell people 3 things make us unique.
Mhm.
Number one, we're principal led, meaning that I'm still involved in our with our clients on a week to week basis. Does that mean, I'm working in our client work on a day to day basis? No, you get to sign a consultant that works alongside you, your campaign. They're typically the ones that come on site with you and help kind of manage the capital campaign. So all that you say, principal led. So I'm still very much part of the strategy and the execution of the work that we do with our clients. And, what does that look like? It doesn't just mean I email the clients once a week. It means I quite literally still jump on client calls
Yeah.
weekly. Um, Secondly, we in all of our capital campaigns that we're running thus far, we've incorporated planned giving into all of our capital campaigns successfully. We've had campaigns that have raised, $500,000 from planned giving
Wow.
thus far. So we're able to kind of bring that to the toolbox of, it's not just a capital campaign and then we're in and we're out. We're also kind of just able to leverage our fundraising expertise and kind of bring plan giving into our capital campaign timeline.
Mhm.
And I'd say the third piece, and I think this is really unique, is that we kind of bring a modern digital approach, right? I think oftentimes when you work with consultancies, sometimes there's kind of the complaint that they're just counsel, right? They're not doing anything for us, right? I'd say our model, we're a bit of a hybrid model where there's consultancies that are what is called in residence counsel, right?
Mhm.
There is consultancies that are purely consultative, meaning that they just literally just jump on a call and say, do these 3 or 4 things and
Right.
see you next week. I'd say we're a hybrid, right? So we help, we write all the copy, we do all the design, we do all the donor segmenting, we sit across the table with you on some of your largest asks in the campaign. We're on site training your volunteers. We show up for volunteer meetings. So it's very hybrid. As I like to say, some firms take the approach that, we're a remote first company or we're an on-site company. I'd say we're a client first company, meaning
Mm.
that we show up whenever it's the most important.
Yeah.
Um, so that's a little, but on kind of the modern kind of digital approach, sometimes when you're working with consultancies, right, they do great, whether it's, kind of coming on site, executing that kind of a thing. But a lot of the times, one of the things that I've noticed is there's often a lag in regards to using all the channels that we can use. I'd say particularly in the public phase of a campaign, right? Um, so with all of our capital campaign work and of course the annual appeal work, we produce all the social media assets, all the email marketing assets, all the, trifold, the kind of the assets that you need in a public
Yeah.
phase of the campaign that I feel like is often, and I'm almost there to say always lacking in some of kind of, let's say, more of the legacy firms, right?
Mm.
So we're able to kind of bring that offering into the space at an affordable price point. You kind of asked, who we are. I think you asked kind of our mission statement. And I'd say, we exist to bring renewal to the fundraising space at an affordable price point.
Mm.
I
Mm.
loved the work that we did at CCS. I think there's still very much, you know, um, it's funny. I was just on ChatGPT asking him about consultancies and like approaches and stuff like that. And it's funny they like brought up CCS and it was like the gold standard of fundraising consultants.
Mm.
And I'd say they're regardless of what you think of them, they're definitely the biggest, and you don't get the biggest without a good reputation.
Yeah.
Um, but they're also expensive,
Mm.
and I felt like you could bring a lot of the same quality and dedication to excellence at a rate that wasn't huge and yeah, and that was also a part of the clients that I often wanted to work with, which were on the religious side, often had constraints in regards to the price point, right? So now we're able to kind of bring that to a niche that has been wanting that level of excellence, detail, execution, but now can afford it, right?
Nice.
So yeah, that's maybe not the most linear way to answer that question, but yeah, I'd say that's kind of what makes us unique and kind of why we do the work that we do.
Wonderful. Thank you. If you could just as a follow-up, describe without naming names, if possible, typically where are your clients? Are they domestic, international, a mix? Are they mostly in the faith-based sector?
That's a great question. I'd say 80% plus, probably closer to 90% right now of our clients are in the religious space.
Okay.
Catholic schools, churches, universities, um, camps. Let me think of some of the other ones. Just ministries
Yeah.
but I'd say we've also signed, I mean, some national campaigns. I mean, we're currently working with, some pretty large national campaigns, which, I'd say, big firms were at the table, and it was pretty competitive
Mm.
to win those campaigns. And some of those, I'd say, two of those are non-religious. So yeah, in regards to geography, it's been interesting to see this firsthand. I'm based out of Louisville. Formerly, previous to that, I was, you know, spent my week in Chicago working. But I grew up in the Austin, Texas area. I went to college in southern Louisiana, right outside New Orleans. So I have deep ties down there. So, but I'd say 80 to 70% of our revenue comes from Texas or the Gulf Coast,
Okay.
which is
Yeah.
interesting. I often tell people, yeah, José Rodriguez is going to have a conversation with an organization in Natchez, Mississippi. They
Yeah.
called José Rodriguez to work with an organization in Natchez, Mississippi. So there I go. And those people are lovely, and that's a great town if you ever find yourself in Mississippi. I think they have like the largest set of renovated antebellum homes, so tons of tourists come through there. I didn't believe it. I was like, and Natchez, a tourist hub. I think I showed up on one of the days where like one of the like tourist. Oh man, what is it called? It's like a Norwegian a company that has like tourism boats, but they come down
Oh,
they
the
come
Viking cruise?
yeah, they have a Viking cruise that goes through Natchez, Mississippi. And I like, get out of my meeting and there's literally hundreds of tourists in Natchez, Mississippi. I'm like, oh man, you weren't kidding. There's hundreds of people that come here weekly. Uh, but so yeah, I'd say all that to say the majority of our clients are, I'd say 70% of our clients are in the South, but we're starting to get clients from all over the place. I mean, if I look at our dartboard of leads, I mean, they're as far west as like Fargo, North Dakota, as
Mm,
far north. I mean, I have a client right now in northern Wisconsin. We have a client right now in Northern Virginia. So kind of, we kind of go where the clients are, and thankfully we have a big enough team now that we can travel to those clients and satisfy their needs. So
yeah.
yeah, out of the thing, we've been blessed that kind of out of the gates, we are kind of been a national firm in some ways, right? I kind of tell people, people have asked me before, they're like, "Oh, do you have a lot of work in Louisville?" I'm like, "Actually, I don't."
Oh.
Actually, now I have three clients, but I used to only have one.
Mm,
And I used to tell people, "Hey, I got, two consultants in Texas, one consultant in Mississippi, and yeah, so we've been able to kind of make it work." But yeah,
mm.
that's kind of where a lot of our work is right now.
Thank you for sharing that. I have a follow-up, as you mentioned that 80% of your clients are Catholic-based organizations. Are you hearing from clients specifically or generally in the last year, since Pope Leo has become the new pontiff, that there's an uptick of interest, donations from your clients' donor base with an American Pope?
That's a great question, and I don't know if I would trace this back necessarily to Pope Leo, but if you look statistically, Pew Research Center stats and stuff like that, I think like last year was the first year officially that the church actually gained people rather than lose people
Mm,
in the United States, right? So
yeah,
typically we lose people a few ways. People stop practicing, people die, right? Those are obviously the most common, especially with the baby boomers, right? Everyone talks about the transfer of wealth. I mean, there's also a transfer in church membership, right? Like
yeah.
people just passing away. But yeah, there's been an interesting phenomenon in the Catholic Church right now where a lot of Gen Zers are converting
Mm.
to the faith. Um, and it's been really interesting. I go to a weekly men's group. Um, we meet at 7, and the guy that complains about it has no kids, is 22, complains about the time,
Oh.
has no kids, is 22. But his perspective on the faith is just like, he grew up unchurched,
Mm,
everything's new. He has also, there's just a lot of like cultural differences, it seems like, amongst Gen
mm,
Zers. Um, yeah, we had like this non-religious aside conversation for 30 minutes about ambition and
mm,
how he felt that like um a lot. Yeah, he just had he attributed um a certain level of ambition to not being really an interest of Gen Z, which I found really interesting.
mm,
But yeah, so I think Pope Leo aside, we're seeing this large influx of Gen Zers into the church, or even just reverts. I mean, I've
yeah.
seen it in my own family. My mom's one of 11, my dad is one of 8. Um, and as I like to tell people, all my aunts and uncles at least had 4 kids. So I have like 100 first cousins.
Oh,
I'd go to CCD class as a kid, like my first communion class, and I remember a kid making fun of me, and they're like, "Dude, this whole class is related to you." And I remember looking up, and I remember looking at the kids around in my class. I'm like, "He's not wrong. 50% of this class are my cousins, right?" Uh, so I grew up in a very, at least culturally Catholic home.
yeah.
But it's been interesting to kind of see some of my cousins who are all throughout the U.S. I'll get a text message here or there, and I'll text me, "Hey, Jose, I'm coming into the church again." I'm like, "Oh, I did not expect that." So
Great.
yeah, there's this interesting phenomenon, and I say in the U.S., but actually, they're also seeing it in Europe. I think France specifically
Mm,
seeing it. I saw a statistic the other day, and you'll have to fact check it, but I think like Catholics in England, out of all places, I think it's estimated that Catholics will outnumber Anglicans in England in the next like 5 years, just
Oh
because of
my goodness.
conversions and stuff like that. I know, right? What a turn of events historically. So yeah, there's just kind of been this massive renewal in the church. It seems like, I went to, and maybe this kind of illustrates it a little bit. I started this young adult ministry at my church, man, maybe 12 years ago. And it was literally me and three guys. I'd say by the time that we left, about 3 years after that, we had a consistent group of about 30 to 40 folks coming to that group. Um, you know, it's kind of funny how things go full circle. I went and I visited them in Austin about a month ago. They were saying that they have actively anywhere between 250 to 300 adults coming to weekly events at the church. I think they had something like 40 people at that church specifically coming to the church. They had like 100 people show interest. Like they had 100 people show up kind of to the informational session, which just kind of blew my mind.
Yes, yeah.
But they went from having they said Jose, they're like, Jose, 8 months ago we had 1,600 people come to mass on a weekly basis
Mm,
on the weekend. They're like, fast forward to today, we have at least 2,600 people coming to.
wow.
They're like over a period of 6, 8 months. I was like, man, that blows my mind. So yeah, I think something's happening. If we look at interviews of like Gen Zers and stuff like that, I think we I grew up in the age of technology, but often, and I see this with my oldest son. I think they've really kind of come up in an age of just like an infinite amount of information, right? Especially in an age of AI. And I sense that there's a lot of purpose burnout,
Yeah.
and I found something that gives them some foundation, you
Oh,
know. So yeah, that's I feel like I was a little bit on my soapbox there a little bit, but yeah,
oh,
Pope Leo's been
right.
great though. I mean, just even culturally, right? Like his love of baseball has been awesome. All of my boys love baseball,
Oh.
so it's kind of been awesome for them to see him, have a love for baseball. My kids are also into sneakers a little bit. So, there was this Instagram post from the Vatican that went a little viral, and it was like Pope Leo. He was wearing his dogmatic and his chasuble, and then you could see maybe the last 2 inches, you could see his shoes, and he was wearing Nikes. I don't know if you saw that picture. But
No.
I showed it to like my 4-year-old, and his name's Santiago. He's like, I didn't know Pope Leo had Jordans. I was like, he is from Chicago, right out of all places. So that's cool. But it's also really cool that he has this like Latin American kind of twist to it, right? He spent a lot of years in
Yes,
Peru, and isn't just you know America isn't quite always the center of the universe. At least it's not.
that's
It's
right.
not mentioned in the gospel at all. So,
That's right. Yes,
uh, so yeah. So that's been super cool to see, for sure.
definitely. Well, thank you for sharing all of that. For our last question, I've come to this question quite a bit with guests because it captures the personal as well as the professional side in the question, from author and social scientist Arthur Brooks. And that's really the purpose of this podcast, is to get professional side and some of who the guest is outside of their day job. And so a few years ago, he wrote this piece in the Atlantic where he argued that, quote, the happiest people have a balanced portfolio of four things: the transcendental, which is to say the spiritual things bigger than you; your family, second; your community, third, which is your service and friendships; and fourth, in that balanced portfolio, is earning success through meaningful work that creates value. So, Jose, for you, you've talked about pretty much all four of those ingredients in the balanced portfolio: the spiritual, the family, the community, and the work, certainly. Um, are there other things that you would add into that portfolio for you? And how might you focus to ensure that there is, at any one point, as much of a balance of ingredients as possible?
Yeah. I'd say I've come to, I'm grateful right now, I think, to um, be in a place where I feel like um, I'm experiencing a lot of grace, thankfully. I feel like I'm in a place and I was actually just talking to a colleague who also runs his own firm, small little firm out of Iowa, um, just telling him how like I feel really good professionally, personally. I feel like I'm in a really good spot. I'd say one of the things though that I'd say has been a really big focus for me in the last year and a half or so, has been kind of not just focusing on, right? Because you can put out these RFPs, right? And sometimes people just want to fill up their bucket to get to five, right? Or whatever the number is, right? And,
Yeah.
you know, um, so I kind of, came to this realization that I'm really only going to focus on the things that make me successful as an entrepreneur, right?
Mm.
Like what are some daily metrics that I can say at the end of the day, I did my best, and
Yeah.
the rest is the rest, right?
Sure.
Like there's just a level of things that I can't control, right? So I'd say I think it was the founder of 1-800-Junk, kind of talks about kind of this entrepreneurial model, and he calls it it's a focus on three things: faith, focus, and effort. So faith, kind of having, of course, we can think about that in the religious sense, right? I think he, in some ways, kind of meant it more in kind of the existential sense of,
Mm.
we got to believe that we can do this,
Oh, sure.
right? We have to have extreme belief that we can do this, right?
Yeah.
Focus, right? Hey, did I dilly dally for 30 minutes, in my email or in my HubSpot or on my LinkedIn, today?
Yeah.
Making sure that we're focusing and providing all that we can on our end in regards to our output. And then the last thing being effort, right?
Mm.
He kind of talks about, if you take a calculator and assign yourself a 1 through 10 ratio of right, and let's say you got a 7, right, you put that in the calculator, that's a 0.7. Let's say that was focus, right, let's say, and then for effort you gave yourself an 8, so that's a 0.8.
Mm.
And then focus, let's say you gave yourself let's say a 6, a 0.6. That is like a 56 out of 100, right? And he
Mm.
kind of says, hey, if you want to be successful in entrepreneurialism, he's like, you got to strive to at least hit, 70% plus on any
Yeah.
given day. So that's kind of been something that I've kind of taken to heart on a day-to-day basis of like, hey, I can't I can't control, the next referral that comes in or the
Sure.
decision making that happens, right? I mean, especially in my work, it's not like um in my work, decisions are often made by committee, right? People
Mm.
are looking at 3 to 4 proposals, everyone's looking at them, and it's not just because you connected with Tim and you're on your inside. There's 5 or 6 other people also, weighing in on the decision making here, right? So
Yeah.
I'd say that that's kind of been a big point of focus for me is how am I showing up every day, and if I'm giving my all to all the things that I do, and that's been a great a great focus for me every day. Um, so yeah,
I like that framework. I hadn't heard that before, but just the faith, effort, and focus and the calculator analogy. So thank you
yeah,
for sharing that.
yeah. No, I think just even the mathematical side of it, I think is sobering a little bit.
Yeah.
It's like, oh, okay.
Right.
Um, yeah.
Well, Jose, it's been a delight to have you as a guest today. Thank you for your time and for sharing your insights with our audience.
Yeah, excited. Thanks for joining here, Tim. Thanks. I know we had a little bit of a sidebar conversation before the podcast here on your insights on donor prospecting and that kind of a thing. So I appreciate your insights there, and thanks for being a resource for myself there as well. But yeah, excited to see when this comes out, and look forward to staying in touch.
Likewise, Jose, thank you. And for our audience, you'll be able to find Jose Rodriguez's People in Fundraising conversation later this summer, 2026, across the various channels you're accustomed to: YouTube, Podbean, Spotify. And thanks to my 100th guest, Luis Diaz of Wise, and the Donor Participation Project for his sponsorship of my website. You can find Jose's conversation and all other guests' conversations at peopleinfundraising.wordifysites.com. Thank you, Lewis. And Jose, thank you for your time, and let's stay in touch.
Yeah, awesome, Tim. Thank you so much.
Thank you.